We all think we know this story. A girl chases a rabbit, falls through a hole, and stumbles into a world of impossible creatures, collapsing logic, and delightful nonsense. But what if Wonderland wasn't fantasy at all? What if it was a warning? One born from a real discovery so strange and unsettling that it cast a shadow over the entire tale. The questions it raised began to echo something far older too, ancient myths of descent and transformation. And the truth underneath this story is far more disturbing than anyone imagines. This is Alice in Wonderland stripped of innocence, a descent not into imagination, but into the dark recesses of the mind that dreamed it, drenched in psychological archetypes, deep mythic meaning, and intertwined with the sinister machinery of the age that produced it. Is this childhood classic actually a mirror, showing us the sickness, secrecy, and the surreal horror of Victorian England? Because behind the whimsical surface lies a coded portrait of a society drowning in drug addiction, moral repression, industrial madness, and the collapse of reason itself. Tonight, we are not asking what Wonderland means in the story. We're asking what Wonderland was hiding in real life, and what ancient secrets Alice's journey might truly be repeating. You're watching Vortex Mythology. Subscribe, like this video, and get ready to crawl deeper than Alice ever dared. Before we investigate the world of Wonderland and explore the fascinating, direct comparisons to some of mythology's darkest and most infamous journeys, we need to set the scene. We need to understand the origins of Alice, the strange, unsettling world she descends into, and the dark, real-life secret that cast a shadow over this story. Before the madness of Wonderland existed, there was a quiet Oxford mathematician, Charles Dodgson, known to the world as Lewis Carroll. Carroll had a reserved, almost painfully shy personality, but around certain children, especially the little sisters, he became animated, imaginative, and alive in a way few adults understood. Alice Little, the inspiration behind Alice herself, was 10 years old when he began telling her the earliest versions of the Wonderland tales. On the surface, the stories seem light-hearted, whimsical, safe, but beneath them lies a complicated relationship. One history still debates, one Carroll's own family tried desperately to obscure. Because when Carroll died in 1898, the discovery of his diary was deeply troubling. Entire pages had been removed, carefully and surgically gone. No explanation, no surviving fragments, no timeline. His family refused to discuss the missing entries, and biographers labelled them the Lost Days. And to this day, no one knows what was on those pages or why they were destroyed. Victorians rarely erased history unless it needed to be forgotten. And this absence, this rabbit hole, torn into the record of a man's life, mirrors the rabbit hole Alice falls into at the beginning of the story. A sudden plunge into secrecy, a gap where the truth should be. A descent into something hidden and unstable. Carroll himself lived at a time when England was obsessed with appearances, moral purity, respectable society, an unbreakable facade of order. Yet behind closed doors, this empire was soaked in vice, addiction, repression, and corruption. Wonderland became the dream version of the world, logic bending, words losing meaning, adults behaving like lunatics and children threatened with violence, and authority figures screaming for heads to be removed at the slightest inconvenience. Carroll wasn't escaping reality, he was exposing it, but in a form only a child could ask questions about. Victorian England had a drug problem, a catastrophic one. Opium was everywhere. In pharmacies, in teething syrups, in household medicine cabinets. Laudanum, a potent opium tincture, was sold openly to treat everything from headaches to heartbreak. Parents unknowingly drugged infants with Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, which contained morphine strong enough to kill. Addiction was not a secret, it was a lifestyle. And Wonderland reflects the drug-soaked culture with unnerving clarity. Alice drinks mysterious potions without hesitation. She eats unknown substances that warp her size and perception. Her body expands and contracts uncontrollably, the same physical distortions many addicts describe during withdrawal or opiate-induced hallucinations. Even the caterpillar sits on a mushroom, exhaling thick clouds from a hookah pipe. Victorians recognised this symbol instantly. This wasn't whimsy, it was a portrait of the narcotic haze that blanketed society. Carroll was a mathematician, not a pharmacologist, but he lived in a world where drugs shaped daily life. In hospitals, surgeries were performed under early anaesthesia mixtures. In factories, workers relied on stimulants to endure brutal shifts. In households, opium became the quiet killer of the poor. Wonderland's transformations aren't magical, they're chemical. And then there's the Duchess's baby who morphs grotesquely into a pig. On the surface, it's absurd. In context, it's disturbing. Babies exposed to narcotic-laced syrups suffered spasms, disorientation, and failure to thrive. Many died. Carroll's image of a child warped beyond recognition reflects the consequence of a society numbing itself into madness. The Mad Hatter, who appears briefly yet overshadows the entire story, embodies a different poison: industrial mercury exposure. Hatters in England inhaled mercury fumes daily during the felting process. They suffered tremors, hallucinations, personality changes, violent outbursts, and irreversible neurological damage. Mad as a Hatter was not fiction, it was a medical reality. This character, and the mythological archetype behind him, is so fascinating we explore it, and its madness, in another video. Part crazy wizard, part tragic tale. Wonderland wasn't a dream, it was a warning. A vision of what happens when a society intoxicates itself on its own inventions, poisons its own workers, and drugs its own children. And the contrast is what makes it chilling. Wonderland is painted in bright colours, but the world it mirrors is rotting. In Wonderland, power is irrational. Rules contradict themselves. Trials begin before crimes are revealed. Authority figures scream orders that make no sense. This isn't a parody of fairy tales, it's a parody of Victorian England. Take the Queen of Hearts. Impulsive, hysterical, obsessed with executions. She represents monarchy twisted into farce. Her soldiers paint white roses red to avoid punishment, a reference to the War of the Roses, where allegiances were symbolised by colour. In Wonderland, loyalty is purely cosmetic, a performance to avoid violence. The Queen's power is arbitrary, her justice non-existent. For Victorians, this wasn't fantasy, it was commentary. Their world was governed by unyielding hierarchies, unexamined privilege, and institutional cruelty. Children were beaten in schools, workers were jailed for debt, women had no legal personhood. Carroll's Queen of Hearts is the distilled caricature of all of this, a ruler whose emotions define reality. And then there is Victorian education. Alice recites her lessons, but they crumble in her mouth. Multiplication becomes nonsense. Poetry becomes parody and memory collapses. Carroll wasn't mocking children. He was mocking the system that taught them. Victorian schools emphasized rote memorization, blind obedience, and mechanical recitation. Students learned answers, not meaning. Wonderland reveals this by breaking the system in front of us. The lessons become absurd because they were always absurd. Alice's confusion mirrors a generation taught to memorize without understanding. And then we reach the trial scene, the climax of Wonderland's madness, a courtroom where verdicts precede evidence, where the judge is also the king, where logic suffocates under ritual, and where Alice finally realizes that the entire system is hollow. You're nothing but a pack of cards. It's the moment she wakes up. Not because the dream ends, but because the illusion of authority collapses. The cards scatter, the fantasy shatters, and the nightmare breaks open. Carroll's message is clear. Power is an illusion sustained by fear, and Wonderland exposes it by pushing it to its logical, or illogical, extreme. Now, before we journey back even further, let's recap. What is Wonderland? It is not the madness of a child, it is the madness of an empire. It is Victorian England reflected back through a dream. Addiction disguised as magic, tyranny disguised as whimsy, industrial poisoning disguised as eccentricity, and rigid social structure disguised as nonsense. And what about the missing diary pages? They remind us that Carroll himself was navigating a society obsessed with secrecy, a culture that documented everything, yet erased whatever threatened its facade. His family cut away portions of his life, just as history has done to countless uncomfortable truths. Wonderland embodies that erasure. Things disappear, logic dissolves, meaning evaporates, and yet, beneath the nonsense, is a coherent world, a world sickened by repression, inequality, addiction, and hypocrisy. So Carroll's true trick was genius. He hid revolution inside a children's fantasy. He exposed the irrational foundations of Victorian life and made readers laugh while watching their own society collapse into absurdity. The real madness was never in Wonderland. It was in the world that created it. But Wonderland's secrets don't end there. Because Alice's fall, her strange, spiralling descent into chaos, echoes something far older, more ancient, deeper, and more universal than Victorian England ever understood. So now let us go further, into the mythic patterns and ancient archetypes hidden inside her journey, the ones that stretch back through centuries of descent stories, underworld myths, and a dreamworld initiation. Alice's fall through the rabbit hole is more than a plot device. It is one of the oldest stories humanity has ever told. Long before Carroll, long before Victorian England, long before children's literature existed, cultures across the world told stories and tales of figures who slipped, willingly or not, into hidden worlds where logic fractured, identity dissolved, and transformation began. Alice joins this long lineage. Her descent echoes the oldest mythic pattern on Earth, the journey into the underworld. In the ancient Sumerian tale, the goddess Inanna descends into the realm of the dead. She is stripped of her clothing, her jewels, her identity, piece by piece, until she stands defenseless before the queen of the underworld. Alice experiences the same unraveling. Her body warps, her memory falters, her lessons fail her, and even her sense of self dissolves until she asks the question, "Who in the world am I?" The pattern continues in Greek myth. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, the goddess who keeps the world alive with harvest and growth, is pulled into a realm beneath the earth where normal rules collapse. Her descent begins when she is taken into the underworld, the realm known as Hades. And despite modern retellings, the ruler of this world, Hades himself, isn't a cartoon villain. He is in fact a complex, law-bound ruler of a vast, silent kingdom. But to anyone entering from the surface, his world feels disorientating, dreamlike, and deeply unstable, if this sounds familiar. And there, Persephone eats pomegranate seeds, the food of the dead, binding her to that realm. And we can go deeper with the way that Wonderland lines up. The Queen of Hearts is a distorted echo of that underworld court. Her world makes sense only to those who already belong there. Alice, like Persephone, drops from order into chaos, from structured world into one where identity warps, meaning dissolves, and survival depends on navigating madness. Depending on the version, of which there are many throughout history, Persephone does return, sometimes temporarily, sometimes permanently, and like Alice, she returns changed. Not rescued, but transformed by what she's seen. A descent, a reckoning, and a return. A pattern that is the spine of the ancient underworld journey. The catabasis, the hero's descent undertaken by figures like Orpheus, Aeneas, Dante. A fall into chaos. A confrontation with forces that distort her identity. Strange guides, bewildering trials, revelations of truth. And finally, a return. An emergence back into the light. Changed. But Alice isn't just a participant in the hero's descent. She is also part of the feminine initiation archetype, a pattern seen in myths from every corner of the world. In Slavic folklore, Vasilisa, the wise, is sent into the dark forest to seek fire from Baba Yaga, the evil witch whose house stands on chicken legs. And like Alice, Vasilisa faces riddles, madness, and the unpredictable wrath of an unhinged queen figure. Her journey strips her of childhood obedience and forces her into awareness. In Celtic tradition, heroes journey to Tir Nanoch, the other world of eternal youth, where time breaks apart and nothing behaves as it should. Wonderland is a Victorian mirror of that realm, bright, enchanting, yet deeply unsettling. Even shamanic initiations from Siberia to the Amazon describe the same sequence: a collapse of normal reality, impossible beings, body distortion, loss of self, and a final awakening with new knowledge. Alice's oscillating sighs, her identity crisis, and the illogical creatures she meets all reflect these ancient visions. And what makes Alice remarkable isn't that she descends, it's that she returns, conscious, questioning, and transformed. Her awakening on the riverbank is the final step of the mythic cycle, the rebirth, the emergence from darkness with a new understanding of the world above. And so, when we look at Alice in Wonderland, we aren't witnessing the dream of a Victorian child. We are watching a universal rite of passage, a story as old as civilization, wrapped in the colours of a children's book and the anxieties of an empire. Wonderland is the underworld disguised. Alice is the initiate reborn, and her descent is the same one humanity has walked for thousands of years. So when you think of Alice in Wonderland, remember this. It isn't just satire or symbolism or a clever Victorian puzzle box. It is a myth, an ancient journey wearing a modern mask. Thank you for watching Vortex Mythology. If this descent into the deeper patterns behind Alice's tale intrigued you, subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments which other stories should we unmask next. And until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and never stop exploring the worlds beneath the world you think you know.